Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me back. And Charlie, all of my wigs are big. So, Charlie asked me to come and speak. I did this speech on September 11th, about 9/11. Jock was there to record it, and it's got more hits on Facebook and all the social media stuff than anything I've ever done. Like, take a picture of my socks in the drawer or whatever. But Jock's my new agent. He's only charging me 20%, so I had to give him like half my bacon lunch.
Glad to do it, Michael.
First of all, the last time I was here, we hadn't opened the museum yet. So I want to give you a brief museum update and then tell you a story. So we opened March 25th, 2025, which is National Medal of Honor Day. So we've been open about 6 months, and we're doing well. We've got a lot of corporate people coming in to do events and private events and that type of thing. Patrons are steady flow. We could always use more patrons. So if you haven't been to the museum yet, please drop by and come and see what we're all about. I think you'll want to come back. And we've got a great membership program as well, so check that out. But we built the National Medal of Honor Museum really for 3 reasons. The first reason is to preserve the legacy of the Medal of Honor itself and the values that are embodied in it: courage and sacrifice, commitment, integrity, citizenship, and patriotism. We also built it, second reason, to preserve the legacies of the recipients of the Medal of Honor themselves, and we do that by telling their stories in the museum. We're a biography museum. We tell their life stories. And that really leads to the third reason why we built the museum, because when you learn about them, you realize they are very ordinary people. They grew up like us. They have the same challenges we all did growing up. They have their reasons for going into service in the first place. And then in a moment in time on the battlefield, courage meets circumstance, and they do something extraordinary. So we want every person, it's the third reason why we built it. We want every person who comes into the museum to see themselves in some story we're telling and be inspired to do more extraordinary things in their life too. 3 reasons why we built it. Now, a little bit of history of the Medal of Honor. I know most of y'all know what it is, our nation's highest award for valor in combat. It was signed into law by President Lincoln in 1861. Since then, more than 40 million of us have served in the military. We've got 3,520 recipients of the Medal of Honor. So I'll let y'all do the math on that. Only 61 living today, 9 of them in the great state of Texas. More living recipients in Texas than in any other state in the Union. As I usually say these things, everything Texas is routine. I just screwed that joke. Everything is bigger in the state. 3 of them live in North Texas. So really good. Charlie, we'll try to get one of the 3 North Texas. That'd be great. We'll have the honor. So I think thanks, Eric. Full trip. We actually have 3 different parts to our project at the museum. Not only do we have the National Medal of Honor Museum, we're trying to build a National Medal of Honor Monument in Washington, D.C. We want to build that on the National Mall. So to do that, it takes an act of Congress. It literally takes an act of Congress to build a monument on the mall. And fortunately, in 2021, the House and Senate voted unanimously, and the President signed it into law so we could build the National Medal of Honor Monument on the National Mall. Now, where on the National Mall do we want to build is the other question. So we want to build it, as our bill says, within 1,000 feet of the Lincoln Memorial. That's in a special area of the mall called the Reserve. So guess what it takes to build a monument in the reserve? Another act of Congress. So in January, when the new House was sworn in, I think on their second day, they passed the bill unanimously. So we're still undefeated on the bill. The Senate has yet to act on the project, but the bill says we're going to build it within 1,000 feet of the river. Hopefully we'll get the Senate to vote on that. I think the President will sign it, and we can get on with planning and fundraising for the monument. Our Medal of Honor Griffin Institute stood up a couple of years ago, even before we had a building, now operating three distinct programs within that institute. A character education program for the kids. It's going really well. Our curriculum is going to 22 schools in North Texas, mostly in ISD, but in North Texas this year. Next year, we're going to spread that throughout North Texas and then into the state of Texas the following year. Crawl, walk, run there. But all that curriculum is based on those values of the Medal of Honor. How do you use those values to overcome challenges you're facing as a kid and all of that? And so we've had some real positive experience with it so far. Great relationship with the Arlington ISD, delivering that curriculum. And we have a great relationship with the National Football League, and we're in their character playbook that goes to 300,000 eighth graders across the country with 5 Medal of Honor videos in that character playbook that teach those kids about how to use the values of the Medal of Honor to make decisions, think, act, that type of thing. So already a great success story. Our leading in the moment leadership part of the Griffin Institute has also been up and running for a couple of years. And next week, this Monday, we've got Lucas Oil coming in. It's their second or third time with us, and they're going to do a full day with us on how we teach those values of the Medal of Honor to develop leaders with character. We're not trying to produce leaders, we're trying to produce leaders with character out of the Griffin Institute, all based on those values of the Medal of Honor. So we inspire them to use those, we equip them on how to do it, we connect them with other people who've already been through the program, who already realize those values can be a driving force for how they live and lead at home and work, community, and the nation. So all of that is going well. I'm now leading what we call the Center for the Elevation of Honor within the Griffin Institute. It's a speakers program first and foremost, and we are just standing that up. And what we're really excited about is on October 3rd, which is a week from Friday, General Stan McChrystal will be here as our first speaker in the Speaker Series. And for the Gray Eagles, Charlie's going to talk a little bit more about that, or I can talk about it right now. If you go to our website, and he's going to send out a link that you all can use too via email, I hope, right?
Yes.
Okay. You click on that link and you use the code HONOR100, and we're going to gift you a ticket. And get 2 if you want. We just want to fill the room. So it's a $100 value, by the way. And you'll be able to see General Stan McChrystal at 6 p.m. Friday night, October 3rd. I know high school football is here. We're done by 7, so we can get you there, sometime in the first quarter, I'm sure. He's worth coming to see. He's got a great book out called On Character. I read it. It's a wonderful book, and he'll be there to sign that book as well. So please come and see us. It's very important that we show that we're supporting this. We're filling it up because we're going to have some other great speakers coming in that we're working on for winter and spring. And can't wait to tell you about those. I can't do it yet, but I can't wait to tell you about those too. So that's some of the things that we're doing at the Medal of Honor Museum since we've been open. Again, I encourage you to come and see us. I told you we're a biography museum. We tell stories. So I want to stop I'm going to end the museum update with a flying story, if that's okay. Medal of Honor recipient flying story. And is anybody in here familiar with John C. Red Morgan? Sir. Red was born in Vernon, Texas in 1914. And he was a kind of a spirited child, so he ended up going to military school and did graduate in 1931. And then started off on what we would term as a less than stellar college career, where over the next 4 years, he enrolled and dropped out of 5 different colleges. Fortunately, the last college he attended, the University of Texas in Austin, he learned how to fly without a private pilot's license. So he drops out of Texas with his private pilot's license, and somehow ends up in the Fiji Islands as a foreman on a pineapple plantation. He spends 4 years doing that, comes back home in 1938 with his private pilot's license, attempts to apply to the Army Air Corps. They commended him on the fact that he had a private pilot's license, but they said, well, your academic standing doesn't really meet our standards, so thanks for coming to see us. So he went to work for Texaco in the oil fields in Texas, and in a freak accident, broke his neck. And through that, he became 4F, couldn't even get drafted. So in 41, he decides to go to Canada, and he talks to the Royal Canadian Air Force, got this private pilot's license, and they hired him basically instantly as a sergeant pilot and sent him off to one of the RAF Church Allen in England. So in 1943, the war's in full tilt now, and the Army Air Corps said, that academic standing is not all that important anymore, but you can fly. So he worked a transfer to the 92nd Bomb Group and flying B-17s. He was a co-pilot. So they're on this mission with a bunch of other B-17s to go bomb Hamburg. And they're in their formation, and they're protected by fighters. And the Luftwaffe wasn't really happy to see them, and came in with the Messerschmitts and all of that, and really did some damage to the convoy, to the formation, including Red's airplane called the Ruthie 2. I can't find in the research whatever happened to the Ruthie 1, but they're in the Ruthie 2. And so the back end got shut up pretty down, cut out all of their oxygen. So the air crew in the back, 36,000 feet or so, they've got no oxygen. They're going to suffer from hypoxia. It's getting cold up there. There's also a shell that came in through the windshield, and the windshield hit the pilot in the head. And so he's got a big gash in his head, and he's slumped over on the controls like that. So Red has got to, with all his energy, strength, pull him off the yoke and fly the plane and try to get it back into formation. And all of a sudden the pilot comes to, and the pilot, who is delirious, bleeding, wants to fly the plane. And Red says, "You're not flying the plane." They get into a fight in the cockpit. Red's trying to fly the plane and fight off the pilot at the same time, the pilot's hitting him in the face. And this goes on for 2 hours. Nobody comes in. They've lost all their comms. Finally, the bombardier and the navigator come in and see what's going on. They take the pilot out of his seat and put him into the nose gear and blow him to the nose gear. So now Red's got a decision to make. He's used up a lot of fuel. They're still in the formation. Do I get out of the formation unescorted and try to get it back to England, or do I finish the mission and then we see what happens? He decided to finish the mission. Plus, he doesn't know the status of the guys in the plane. He decides to finish the mission, pickles the bombs, flies it back to Fulsham, RAF Fulsham, not back to Alconbury where he originally. Gets down on the ground, and the guys in the back all survived. They got frostbite, but they all survived. The pilot is taken to the hospital. He dies an hour and a half later. But for Red, going through all of that, accomplishing the mission, and getting his crew back safely, he's awarded the medal. Now, it's a biography museum, so the story's not over. The war is over, and he wants to stay in, and they said, no, it's time for you to get out. And so he's discharged, and he goes back to work for Texaco selling aviation fuel in California. The Korean War kicks off. Well, Red then goes back to the Air Force and says, hey, I want to fly. I got combat experience. They said, there's no way you're going to combat. We're not sending you back to combat. You can fly the cargo transport planes within the continental United States. Does that for 2 years, retires as a lieutenant colonel, and then, unfortunately, in 1992, he dies of Alzheimer's. But think about that story, that guy. How different is he from any of us growing up? What he went through, how he thought. Now, most of us haven't been to a pineapple plantation. Sounds kind of good to me these days. But his story, service, commitment, courage, sacrifice, wanting to go back to the war in the Korean War, patriotism and citizenship, that's still inspiring all of us, including our young kids today. And those are the types of stories we get to tell in the National Naval Honor Museum. So I hope you'll come and see us. Great. All right. Break. Thank you. So 9/11, and I did do a speech on this back in September 11th, 11th Pavilion. I'm going to take a few of those points and just share them with you. I don't want to be really formal about this, just some of my thoughts. And, I didn't really start thinking about 9/11 much until the 20th anniversary for some reason, and then these thoughts started coming into my head as to why, what did we do, what's been the result of all of that. And when I think about 9/11, in the span of our nation's history, we're 250 years old next year. But there's really a few days that are entrenched in our collective memory for the nation. So I'll just go back to the 20th century on this. Of course, Pearl Harbor was one of those days. Kennedy assassination. I think the Apollo moon landing, first moon landing, and of course, I think 9/11 was part of that. When we've been attacked within our own borders by an outside enemy, I've always thought that it's because they saw us as divided, uncertain, and weak. Divided, uncertain, and weak. Certainly was the case in Pearl Harbor. Churchill is begging us to get into the war. We wouldn't do it. And the Japanese, I guess, saw us as weak and said, this is a target we can get. I don't know what they were expecting our response to be, but they got all of us after that. We kind of looked like that in 2001. The economy was starting to slip, and there wasn't a whole lot of confidence, and we were taking advantage of it. I don't want to go into the whole history of that day. You guys know it. I know you know it. But on a really beautiful, perfect morning in Washington, D.C. for September 11th, where it's usually still pretty hot and muggy, it was very cool. Blue sky. We had the windows open. I was on the 5th floor of the Pentagon as the chief of the Air Force press desk. And in the Pentagon is 5 concentric, 5-sided buildings extending 5 floors high. So my office was on the 5th floor. I used to say I worked at the highest levels of the Pentagon. And at 9:37 a.m., I'm the chief of the Air Force press desk, which means I've got about 20 public affairs officers who work for me, who dealt daily with the Pentagon press corps. So all those reporters from our national newspapers, wire services, and national news networks. And that's what we do. And so I'm standing in front of my desk looking at a bank of television monitors, about a dozen television monitors. And, you know, the focus is on what's going on in New York City. And we had our windows open. It was such a nice day, we had our windows open. And, you know, you can't open the windows anymore. And watching the news coverage, and there's a couple of people standing with me, and all of a sudden, I hear this very loud, overpowering, screeching noise. I think I described it as like 1,000 sets of fingernails scratching the chalkboard all at the same time. What I didn't know at the time is commercial jet engines flying at 555 miles an hour. I don't know how you fly a jet like that fast, that low. That's not recommended, right? No? It's fine. And that screeching noise is suddenly stops because there's this thud. Just like that. No screeching noise, but a thud. That thud is immediately followed by a boom. Very loud boom. Immediately following boom, within a second. Think about this. I said 5 concentric buildings, 5-sided. The outer building is called the E ring, and the inner building is called the C ring. And I'm in the C ring, so the very middle building on the eastern side of the Pentagon. On the western side of the Pentagon, American Airlines Flight 77 comes in and strikes a building at 9:37 at 555 miles an hour. So it impacts the E ring, flies all the way through the E ring, all the way through the next building, the D ring, before finally coming to rest inside the middle building, the C ring, on the western side of the building, and I'm on the opposite side. Had our windows open, that boom is immediately followed by a shock wave. My whole building does this. You know, it's all concrete and steel and glass. And when it does this, there's all kinds of stuff blowing into those windows. Rocks, stones, glass. There's sheetrock falling off, coming off the walls, paint, and ceiling tiles. And it was at that point that I turned to the guy at my right, Captain Dave Westover, who's now a retired colonel. I said, I think it's time to go. And we were all able to safely evacuate out the north entrance. They would not let us go over to the west side. We all wanted to help. They said, no, it's now a rescue recovery operation and a criminal investigation site. So we got forced out into the north parking lot. What was incredible was the response of having our medical team, firefighters, Pentagon police. 2 weeks earlier, they had exercised a plane hitting the building, a commercial airliner hitting the building. Back then, the Pentagon was kind of right in the flight pattern of the in the DCA, and so they exercised, and a lot of what they were able to figure out and learn from that exercise, they applied and saved a lot of people. So we're in the north parking. There's helicopters flying low with machine guns out the side. You don't know who are the good guys and who are the bad guys at this point. So it's all kind of nerve-wracking. None of your comms work. We had the flip phones back then. Remember the early cell phones that were flip?
Got one.
Yeah, you got one.
Got one.
It didn't work. The only thing that worked, remember those old BlackBerry things that were pagers that you could do check email on? You got one of those too? That was the only thing that worked. So I could get an email up to my wife, but she didn't check it. So really later that day. And we ended up taking off in my boss's car, going to her townhouse. Her husband and her kid was there. There were about 3 of us. Our director of public affairs ended up over there. And we spent the rest of the day trying to count for people and find them. And we were able to do that by about 7 o'clock that evening with very limited comms. What we all learned from that was there was no plan for anything like this in the Pentagon. Where's your gathering point? You know, that type of thing. How do you use your chain of command to find people? There was nothing. We learned all those lessons. Plus, the fact that we needed to change security in the Pentagon itself. So you can't open windows and you've got to have cyber locked doors and that type of thing. So, I'll never, ever, ever forget this. But I was back at the Pentagon at 6 o'clock the next morning. It was time to go to work. And as I'm pulling into South Parking, so the west side would be over to my left, in the South Parking. The building is still on fire. It's almost 24 hours later. The building's still on fire. It's dawn, it's very gray. And there's this sliver of gray smoke from the fire site. And it's a very thin layer. It goes straight up in a straight line, makes a hard 90-degree turn, and zigzags over the mountain. Unfortunately, those flip phones didn't have cameras because it would have been a great photo. It would have been, I'll never forget it. And went back into the Pentagon. Everything's wet from the sprinkler system. And there's the smell of burning aviation fuel, the materials on the jet, the materials in the Pentagon. It was just this weird smell that, as I said in my speech, stayed with me for many years afterward. And here's what. So I was there from 2000 to 2002 to Korea for a year, came back. They had opened the new Pentagon Athletic Club, basically where the impact of the plane was. So I go to the sign up for the Pentagon Athletic Club, I could still smell it. So I'm there for another 2 years. I go off to Air War College, No, actually, I went to Iraq twice. I would come back, and whether you're in the new auditorium, which is basically where the press site was, or the athletic arena, you still smell it. And then I went to Air War College in 2005 and 2006. When I got back, I finally couldn't smell it. So it took 5 years. There's a couple of reactions, that we all had. Immediately, our country stopped being divided by red and blue states, and we became a nation of red, white, and blue. It should always be that way. And, they saw us as divided, uncertain, and weak. But the thing is, in all of those instances when we've been attacked within our borders, what they have failed to learn from history is when you do that, we all answer together. And that makes all the difference. That was just part-time. These other countries who like to do these kinds of things are not, unfortunately, their people are not like us, and I don't think it's a choice. We're not forced to be subjects that bow down to an emperor. We're not mind-controlled minions who are forced to pledge their undying support to a dictator. We are citizens of the greatest country in the history of countries. And so, when you knocked on our door, we all answer. And we all get involved. And we don't fight because we hate what's in front of us. We fight because we love what's behind us. And that makes all the difference. So what has been the result of all of this? Well, we didn't go to war. We lost 7,000 people in the war on terror. 55,000 wounded. 28 people became Medal of Honor recipients. We tell 5 of their stories in the Medal of Honors. We found and killed the person who was responsible for funding and executing the attacks on 9/11. I refuse to say his name. You know who he is. But I think the most important out of all of this is on September 11th, 2024, the 24th anniversary of our second day that lives in England. More than 3 million people boarded 45,000 different flights across the United States to fly to destinations all over the world. I think we won. A lot of that is thanks to you guys for your courage to get back in. So those are my thoughts on 9/11. Who are the heroes? You are. And I thank you for your love of our country, and may God bless our great country.